بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن اهتدى بهديه واستنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Today we are going to talk about a major sin in Islam that has a prescribed punishment to it. And this is the sin of stealing, or known as theft. And the definition of theft varies from one school to the other. So the definition we have in the book is to take something belonging to another person stealthily from where similar things are normally kept subject to certain conditions. So this is one of the definitions, to take something. And this is not accurate, because it should be to take wealth, something of value. And stealthily is a correct description, because if it was done publicly, as we will get to know inshallah and talk about, that would not be considered to be stealing. So when we talk, for example, about the definition in the Hanbali Fiqh, it says that stealing what is considered of value stealthily from the owner or who he deputizes. And again, this definition is not fulfilling the conditions, though it is, or it would be very long to take a definition that would mean explaining rather than defining. So when we talk about stealing, it is prohibited in the Quran, it is prohibited in the Sunnah, and the consensus of Muslims that it is a major sin. Allah says in the Quran, as for the thief, male and female, amputate their hands in recompense for what they committed as a deterrent or a punishment from Allah, and Allah is exalted in might and wise. Also, the Prophet ﷺ, in his lifetime, amputated the hand of a woman known to be Al-Makhzumiyya. She's from the reputable and honorable tribe of Bani Makhzum. And we all know that because of her tribe, many people tried to intercede so that the Prophet ﷺ would not implement such a punishment. And they sent Usama ibn Zayd, whom was known to be the love of the Prophet ﷺ and the son of his love. What is this? It has nothing to do with what people may think, because in the West, when you say to another man, I love you, they take it negatively in a homosexual way, and they say, don't say that, say I like you. And as Muslims, we don't have this nonsense. We don't have, with the grace of Allah, homosexuality or LGBT. All of these things are prohibited in Islam. And the concept of love is a great concept in Islam. The Prophet ﷺ told us about the virtues of loving your brother for the sake of Allah, and that among the 7 who will be shaded in the shade of Allah on the day of judgment, where there's no shade other than His, are 2 who met and loved one another for the sake of Allah and departed on that. And the Prophet told us, ﷺ, whenever you love someone, tell them. So if I find a brother whom is practicing in a good Muslim and I love him for the sake of Allah, the sunnah is to go and notify him, as the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ clearly states. So this kind of love is a love that is endorsed in Islam. Usama ibn Zayd, his father was Zayd ibn Haritha. He was a slave given to Khadija, the mother of the believers, the wife of the Prophet ﷺ, by her nephew Hakeem ibn Hizam ibn Khuwaylid, whom in turn she gave Zayd ibn Haritha as a gift to the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet loved Zayd as a son, so he freed him and he was announced to be Zayd ibn Muhammad. And in the beginning, adoption was permitted in Islam. And then Allah Azza wa Jal revealed in verse 33, in chapter 33, Surah Al-Ahzab, that adoption is prohibited. So he kept Zayd with him as a freed slave. He was a free man, but he loved him as a son. When Zayd married Zainab bint Jahsh, the honorable Qurayshi woman who happens to be the cousin of the Prophet ﷺ, according to the advice of the Prophet, who ﷺ advised her to accept him, she could not live with him a peaceful marriage due to the fact that he was a freed slave and she was a woman from the dignitaries of Quraysh. After a while, he divorced her. And then the Prophet ﷺ chose for him a very old Abyssinian woman by the name of Ayman, who was way older than him. Yet he found peace and love with her, and she gave him, shockingly, his son Usama. Now Zayd was white and Usama was black. And the Prophet ﷺ loved Usama like he loved Al-Hassan and Al-Hussein, his own grandchildren. So, going back to our original story, they, that is the tribe of Bani Makhzum, sent Usama ibn Zayd to ask the Prophet ﷺ for leniency towards this woman who stole money. And the Prophet ordered her hand to be cut off. When Usama came to the Prophet ﷺ and talked to him about it, the Prophet was very angry. And he made a statement for history. And he said, by Allah, what destroyed the nations before you was that whenever an honorable man stole, they let him go. And whenever a poor person stole, they implemented the prescribed punishment. By Allah, if Fatima, the daughter of Muhammad, were to steal, I would have amputated her hand as well. And since then, this was a benchmark for all Muslims, that the prescribed punishment, once it reaches the Imam, the Muslim ruler, it has to be carried out. There's no clemency or leniency in that, because this is the rule of Allah Azza wa Jal. There are a number of conditions that must be fulfilled, and these conditions are almost agreed upon scholars. First of all, the money must be taken stealthily, which means that if a person takes money in broad daylight by force, then we don't amputate. This is wrong, this is stealing, but it does not fulfill the conditions that would make us implement the prescribed punishment and amputate the hand. So it has to be done stealthily. If a person takes goods from another person in broad daylight in front of everyone, he could call others to protect him. He could call the police. But the problem is when it's done in secrecy and no one knows about it, in the darkness of the night. This is difficult to detect, and most likely it would go unnoticed, and this would cause a lot of hardship for the Muslims, for the community, for the individuals who lose their property without being able to protect it. The second condition is that the stolen property should be something of worth, and in Arabic they describe this to be mal. Mal means money, but what does it mean to be something of worth? Meaning that if someone breaks into a house and steals only a box of Cuban cigars or a bottle of 1986 wine, some say, whoa, that's of great value, it costs like $300-500, whatever. We say that this is not honorable wealth, halal wealth. If a person steals a guitar or some drugs, and these things are not halal to be sold. They are not considered to be honored wealth. So there is no amputation for that. It's a crime, it's a sin. He'll be punished, but not through the prescribed punishment. And the third condition is that the value of the honored wealth must reach the threshold. Sheikh, I thought that the nisab or the threshold was only for zakat. This is one of the thresholds, yes. But the Prophet ﷺ also mentioned to us that there is no amputation for someone who steals something less than a quarter of a dinar. And what is a quarter of a dinar? A quarter of a dinar, it is a quarter of mithqal. and this is means of measurement in the Islamic fiqh. And al-mithqal equals to 4 grams 0.25 of gold, of pure 24 karat gold. Therefore, a quarter of a mithqal, which is a quarter of a dinar, which is the threshold, is 1 gram and a quarter of a gram, which it means 1/16th of a gram. You do the math. So if someone steals, for example, something that is worth 100 riyals, no, there is no amputation in here. It's a sin, it's a crime. He's going to be punished through a different ways, but not through amputation. It has to reach the value of 1 gram of gold and 1/16th gram of gold. This is the threshold. The fourth condition is that it has to be stolen from a place where it had been put away or secured, and this is known in Arabic as al-hirs. And what is hirs? Everything is protected in a specific place. You do not keep your money, your cash, in a barn. You do not keep your cattle, your sheep, in a bank. You do not keep your jewelry in a glass box in the middle of the street. So a proper place is known to everybody. You keep cash in a special drawer and lock it. You keep jewelry in a vault or a safe or a chest and lock it. You keep cattle in a barn or in a special area where it's locked so that no wolves could come in and no thieves could barge in, etc. Therefore, if I see a Rolex watch in a glass box in front of a shop at 11 o'clock at night, and I open the box and I take the watch and I run, if I'm caught red-handed, they cannot amputate my hand, because this was not preserved and kept in a special place where such valuable things are usually kept. But if I were to break into a shop and break a vault or a drawer that usually they keep such valuables in, then that would be stealing. And number 5, the theft itself has to be proven, like every other crime. So either a confession from the thief or 2 male witnesses testify that he had stolen the items. And number 6, the person from whom the property was stolen has to ask for it back. So I cannot be more Roman than the Pope. I cannot be more Roman than the Romans, and I can't be more Catholic than the Pope, which means that if someone stole my salary from the drawer inside of a chest in my house, with all these conditions, it was stealthily done, he stole halal money from a well-preserved place for saving it, and it is above the threshold, and he confessed of it. However, I didn't report him to the police. Somebody else did. And the police caught the man, tried him, convicted him, and they want to amputate his hand? No deal. I didn't complain. I didn't file a complaint. Why are you doing this? It's none of your business. I could have forgiven him. And this is why, in a narration that one of the companion, I think he was Safwan ibn Umayyah, was sleeping in the Kaaba, around the Kaaba area, in the Haram, and was using his cloak, which was quite expensive, as a pillow. Someone came and stole it. So he caught him and he took him to the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ordered his hand to be amputated. When Safwan saw that the man's limb would be taken away, he said, "Oh, okay, Prophet, no problem. I give him the cloak." And the Prophet said, "As-salam, too late. You should have pardoned him before it reached the authorities. Once it reaches the Muslim ruler, it's a done deal. It's over. It has to be carried out." So this is similar. If a person does not file a complaint, then there is no case. In addition to these 6 conditions, there are other conditions. For example, the thief has to be an adult, because if it's a child, we don't amputate. He has to be sane, because if he was crazy or insane or mentally challenged, as they call him, then there is no amputation, no prescribed punishment, and so on. Stealing has to be from someone whose wealth is protected, such as a Muslim, such as a dhimmi, and we spoke about these terminologies before, or a mu'ahad, or a musta'man. But if someone stole from a harbi, and if you remember, a harbi is a person who we are at war with. So if a Muslim steals from an Israeli Jew who are occupying free Muslim Palestine unjustly and unfairly, backed by all the tyrants in the West who claims to be democratic. So stealing from such enemies of Islam is okay, because we don't have any peace agreement with them, any treaties with them. They are still classified as enemies of Islam and the Muslims. And finally, one of the conditions which were not mentioned here, that the person who was robbed has no relationship with the thief, so that there can be something dubious. What does this mean? If I steal from my father's wallet and I'm caught red-handed, no one can amputate my hand. If my father steals from my money stealthily with the conditions, this is not one of the conditions that permit the law to amputate his hand, because there is what is known as shubha. What is shubha? There is a slight reason for a person to take a money and would not be considered stealing. A woman takes from her husband's wealth without him knowing, in the same fashion of stealing. This is shubha, they say. There isn't any amputation in this case, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. There are reasons, and why does Islam, it's a good paragraph to read. Islam respects the rights of people to own their property and forbids any aggression against this right, whether it is by theft, embezzlement, cheating, bribery, betrayal of trust, or any other way of unlawfully taking other people's property. A thief is a bad element in society, and if he is unpunished, his evil may spread and cause very serious consequences. Therefore, Islam prescribes this punishment so that it serves as a deterrent to others, stopping them from committing this crime and to ensure the protection of people's property and rights. It should be noted that such a punishment is only carried out for stealing stealthily, as mentioned above in the conditions, which means that if people steal through embezzlement, if I'm a CEO and I put my hands on some of the assets of the company, or I accept bribes, or I take money from a contract awarded by the government as a middleman, as a government official, all of these are heinous crimes and might exceed the threshold of theft by millions and millions. Yet the prescribed punishment of amputating the hand does not apply, because the conditions do not apply to that, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. Now we move on to another form of prescribed punishment, which is actually not prescribed, but the permission was there, and it's called at-ta'zir. The discretionary punishment. It's according to the discretion of the ruler, and it is identified or defined as punishment for any act of disobedience to Allah which does not carry a mandatory punishment or require a particular recompense. Now we understand why every time we speak about a major sin, such as fornication, such as consuming intoxicants, such as slandering, and such as theft, we say that there are conditions to be fulfilled. So what happens if the conditions were not fulfilled? In this case, we refer to at-ta'zir, and this is a subject to the Muslim ruler's discretion. Give example. I'll give you a fresh example. If someone stole stealthily from a properly honored wealth without any shubha, without any doubt, he was adult, he was sane, etc., but the amount he stole was worth half a dinar, which means that it's not the required amount. Well, actually, it's not, it's above. It was less than quarter of a dinar. So someone stole something worth 50 riyals, and the dinar or the less, it should be something of more than that. So the dinar is 4 grams and a quarter. The threshold of stealing is quarter of a dinar, which means 1 gram and 1/16 gram of gold. Someone steals something worth 50 riyals, 100 riyals, because 1 gram is maybe 200 riyals. We take him to the Muslim judge. The Muslim judge says there is no prescribed punishment of amputating his hand. But due to the fact that he did a crime, he did something that was sinful, we will punish him with ta'zir. And this is the sin that is falling short from a sin that requires a prescribed punishment. It fell short from it. If we caught a man red-handed with a woman who's an unmahram, not his wife, in a room for a whole day, and then we caught them, or they were both nude and sleeping together in the same bed, but we did not see the actual thing that allows us to implement the major punishment of fornication or adultery. In this case, it is for the discretion of the judge to prescribe a punishment. Also, other sins that may not be included in such sins, such as delaying the payment of a debt. I gave someone money and he's postponing paying it back. Though he is wealthy, though he has the ability, but he doesn't want to pay back. The Prophet said, alayhi salatu wasalam, delaying the repayment of a debt by a person able to repay it is an act of injustice that allows his punishment. So we can punish him. So a ta'zir is left to the discretion of the ruler. And originally ta'zir means to prevent. So this punishment is made to deter and to prevent and to reprimand someone for doing something which he had done. Why do we say it is prescribed and not prescribed? See, fornication, 100 lashes prescribed. Slandering, 80 lashes. Adultery, stoning to death. Stealing, amputation of the hand. All of these are prescribed. But when it comes to ta'zir, it's up to the discretion of the Muslim ruler. And this differs from one place to the other. As it says here at the end, it can be physical punishment, like flogging, or sometimes death. So in Saudi Arabia, for example, those convicted of dealing in drugs due to the size of their evil. When someone consumes drugs, is different to someone who deals it on a large scale. So the major scholars committee said that such a heinous crime requires a severe punishment of the death penalty. And this is to deter people from smuggling and dealing drugs. And I think this is implemented in so many Muslim countries such as Malaysia, where they have, and Indonesia maybe, where they have the death penalty for anyone smuggling drugs to the country. So this can be physical. It can be related to property. So confiscating someone's property for breaking the law, for destroying other people's properties, or tools. And if he does this, in this case, he has to be reprimanded in the same fashion or more. When Mother Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her, broke the plate that contained food out of anger, when the maid brought it from the house of Safiya, the Prophet compensated Safiya, may Allah be pleased with her and with Aisha, by taking one of Aisha's own plates in exchange for what she had broken. So this is a form of ta'zir. It can be a combination of physical and financial punishment. It can be through imprisonment. It can be through exiling people, sending them out of the country. It can be moral punishment by publicly rebuking him and announcing to the people that he did this or that. So ta'zir is not a one-size glove that fits all. It depends on the time. It depends on the place. Some people would be reprimanded when you simply rebuke him in front of his own people. And that would be much, much more difficult to him than being flogged 10 lashes or taking portion of his money. Some people would be kicked out of his job and terminated. Some people would be taking some of his money and wealth. Some people, you may need to incarcerate them, put them in jail for some time. So this is all part of the Islamic punishment system, and it falls under the jurisdiction of the Muslim Imam, who, according to his discretion, knows how to deal and to choose the right and appropriate opinion of all. It's an issue of dispute whether it can be more, this type of punishment, more than 10 lashes, or must not exceed 10 lashes. And this is something that is an issue of dispute, and it's for the Muslim ruler to implement what he thinks best. So with this, we conclude our class for today, inshallah. And we have a lot of questions. We have Abnura. She says, I would like to ask if it is allowed to use makeup in wedding ceremony, and the one who makes it is from the opposite gender. Is it okay or not? Any interaction between the opposite genders is totally prohibited. It's totally prohibited unless there is a necessity that allows it, such as in the case of a Muslim doctor. So if it is a Muslim doctor and who we are unable to find a female doctor to take his place, and we have a necessity, there's no problem in consulting one. But if it is for something of no necessity at all, such as a hairdresser or a makeup artist or a tailor to take measurements and prepare my wedding dress, she says. In this case, any interaction is totally prohibited and sinful. And the sin would be more if the wedding ceremony is freely mixed, which means that not only this makeup artist would see you, but also your in-laws, your cousins, the guests, non-mahrams, and this is darkness upon darkness. May Allah Azza wa Jal save us all from such fitna. Yusuf says, do I have to say iqama while I read fard salat at home alone? First of all, it is mandatory upon a man to pray in the masjid if the masjid is adjacent and there are no legitimate excuses or reasons to prevent him from doing that. Secondly, all those praying alone or at home or with other small congregations, it is highly recommended for them to call the iqamah. And if you notice that calling the iqamah adds a lot of value to your prayer, because it will not be like any volunteer prayer. You just say Allahu Akbar and do your actions and leave. No, you are preparing for it with a proper call for the salat, and then you are ready to make the inauguration of the salat and you say Allahu Akbar. The process itself increases in your khushu'. So it's highly recommended. But is it mandatory? The answer is no. It's not mandatory and your prayer is valid, inshallah. Asima says, can I choose not to take anything from my parents' property? I'm presuming, Asima, that this is inherited. And the sunnah is when you inherit money from your parents or from your relatives after they die, the sunnah is to accept it, to take it, to possess it, and afterwards you can do with it whatever you wish. So you cannot give it before acquiring it. A friend says to me, Sheikh, I heard you're getting married today, so I'm giving you a new mobile phone as a gift. So Allah Jazakallah khair, may Allah bless you. 5 minutes later, a brother comes and I say, listen, I'm giving you my mobile phone once I get it. Such a gift is not permissible. I did not receive the gift. I did not possess it. How can I give something that I do not possess? As an heir for the deceased, how can you not receive the property and say, I'm giving it to my brothers, I'm giving it to my sisters, when you did not receive it? No, receive your share, not necessarily physically, but by saying that, okay, sis, you have a quarter, I have a quarter as your sister, and our brother has half of the property. Khalas, done deal, okay, ready. Now this is your division, this is your share. After knowing my share and receiving it, or at least acknowledging it, then I say to my sister, listen sister, I don't need my quarter, I have a lot of money, I give my share to you, so you have half and my brother has half. This is permissible, but is it recommended or not? It can be recommended, and sometimes it may not be the best thing to do, especially when they are well off themselves. You can take the money and give it to poor people who are in real dire need. Does a Muslim matron, divorced woman, need her wali permission, needs her guardian permission? And this question is from Ruqayya Abdussalam. Does she need her guardian's permission for marriage? The answer is yes. The Prophet, when he said, alayhi salatu wasalam, in an authentic hadith, there is no marriage valid without the consent of a guardian and the presence of two male witnesses. This was for all types of women and girls. So no marriage is valid without such a consent, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. Farah Abdullah says, if one has doubt between two opinions, then which one should he follow? The majority or the safe one? Well, neither one. Again, we reiterate this issue again and again. You are either a student of knowledge or you're a layman. If you are a student of knowledge and you are capable of tracing back a particular opinion to its evidences from the Quran and from the Sunnah, and scrutinizing these evidences and weighing which is more authentic than the other to come up with a conclusion, then yes, this is a role that you must take and assume, and you must follow the procedure whenever studying different evidences from different opinions. But if you are a layman and you simply don't know the difference between Quran verse and a hadith from the Sunnah, you don't speak Arabic, you have zero knowledge of fiqh issues, for you it is not an issue of following the majority or following the safest opinion, because these are not means of determining what is right and what is wrong. For you, you should be accepting and taking one particular scholar who you believe to be knowledgeable, to be righteous, to be practicing, and to be walking the talk. Such a scholar would be your imam, and due to your deficiency and inability in knowing what is right and what is wrong, he would be the person leading you throughout darkness, and he would be responsible on the day of judgment to answer for whatever choices you made after following his advice. Ahmed Fahim says, what do you say regarding misyar marriage? Misyar marriage is a description that was given recently, maybe in the past 20 to 30 years. And misyar means that you sort of walk by a wife and not live with her 24/7. And this is usually done when there is a need to give concession from the wife's side, whether to financially expenditure, providing for the house, or regarding the distribution of nights between the co-wives, or all of the above. So usually a person like me looks for another wife but is unable to financially provide for her or to rent a house. So he finds someone who is in need of marrying a man and is willing to compromise and to let go of some of her rights. So she says, I am a physician, I'm a doctor at the hospital, and I have my 80-year-old mother living with me in the home, and the maid, and no one is to take care of her except me. I can't get married and lead a normal life, taking care of my husband and children, and leaving my mom behind. And I could not find any husband that would be willing to live with my mom. So, because I have a house, I have money, all what I need is my natural desires to be fulfilled and to be married to a man whom I can speak to occasionally. And the man says, whoa, that's good for me. I'm willing to go for such a marriage. I can come like 3 days a week. I can't sleep over, and I cannot tell my wife about you, because then she would cause problems, and I have kids. I don't want to risk my marriage and my family. But I am in need of another wife because my first wife is not fulfilling my needs. So to them, this is a win-win situation. What's the ruling? The ruling is marriage is valid, providing that she agrees to these conditions. And the man acknowledging the fact that if she changes her mind in 6 months or a year and says, no, now I need to be a full wife like others, that he's obliged to do this or divorce her, then this is a win-win. This is different from someone who is playing around. He's a playboy, but in an Islamic way. So he goes to this woman, he marries her for a month, divorces her, and goes to another woman, marries her for a couple of weeks, divorces her, and all of this is done out of necessity. No, this is haram. But in some particular cases, and this is judged case by case scenario, misyar marriage can be an answer to many unsolved problems that men and women may face and suffer, and Allah knows best. Kuri Palo says, what's the ruling on shaving the mustache? Is it okay? Shaving the mustache is an issue of dispute. The most authentic opinion is that this is not permissible. Imam Malik used to say that this is muthlah, this is mutilation, because the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ stated that we should grow the beards and trim the mustache, not shave the mustache. Therefore, the most authentic opinion is that shaving it is not permissible, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. Manding says, it's a long question, and basically Manding did not know that you must not perform your ghusl to uplift your major ritual impurity after your menses is over, that you should not perform ghusl unless you see one of the two signs of purity, either the white thread-like discharge that is accompanied by no colored discharge, or total dryness. When you wipe or even insert something, it comes clean, no colored discharges. So she says that in the beginning of Ramadan, a few years ago, she had her menses for 6 days. So she skipped them. And then she took ghusl and fasted. And 3 days afterwards, she saw these spots, not the flow of blood. So she broke her fast. But then she saw a video of mine saying that such drops or discharge after the purity are nothing, and you should continue fasting and praying. And she has a confusion now, because when she performed her ghusl initially and fasted that day, she did not see any purity sign. She just did it from her own head. So she says, are these fasting days valid or not? And should I make them up or not? The answer would be, if you were not certain that you were pure and you performed ghusl, your prayer and your fasting is invalid, because the default is that your menses is still going. And always remember the default. issue. A woman is pure for 10 days, 14 days, 20 days, no menses. And then she sees colored discharges. So she stops fasting and praying. But she's doubtful whether this day it started or the other day. We say the default is that your menses did not start because you were pure. And hence the default is that you should be pure. And we always tell you that colored discharges before the beginning of menses is to be neglected and ignored. You're still able to pray and fast. If the menses starts for 6 days, 7 days, and you're doubtful whether the 8th day you were pure or not, the default is that you were not pure, because the 6-7 days continues and would not cease to stop until you see your purity. If there is no certainty, then the default is that you're still on your menses, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. What to do? You have to repeat these days that you were not sure whether you were pure or not, whether you have performed the ghusl correctly or not. But if you were certain that the 2nd day and the 3rd day you were definitely pure from your menses and you saw the sign of purity, then your fasting is correct if you fasted them, but your prayer is not, because the ghusl was not valid. Tahmina says, I'm from Bangladesh. I study law. My question is, can I practice in a court as a woman wearing decent clothes with hijab? In our country, it is hard to accept appear in the court maintaining niqab. I want to practice to give justice to those who are unprivileged. First of all, the issue of studying law, which is un-Islamic, is a very dangerous issue. And a Muslim must not study law, man-made law, French laws and English laws, etc., unless he is strongly founded in Islamic Aqidah. And he acknowledges that all of this is kufr and not relating to Islam. And thirdly, when practice, he should not practice anything that goes against the ruling of Islam, and all his cases must be to help the unprivileged, to ensure justice is being served, but not to rule with man-made laws. Thirdly, a woman must not compromise her niqab. And as I can see from your question that you are a practicing woman wearing the niqab, it is not permissible for a woman to take off her niqab, to stand in front of non-mahram men, to prosecute or to defend, and to speak publicly. This is not permissible in Islam. Why not take the podium and give a Friday khutbah to the congregation as well, wearing the hijab? This is not acceptable in Islam. If you want to help the unprivileged, you can do so from your office. A lawyer, as we all know, cannot prosecute and defend without preparation, without a lot of writing and reading, without a lot of researching and studying. All of this is done in the main office, at the back of the stage, where many lawyers study and write and compile what the lawyer in court is going to say and the approach he's going to take. And Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. Farhana Amin says, my daughter name is Ruzaynah bint Ma'moon. Is it right if I use bint instead of binti? This is not an Islamic thing. The word itself is bint. So we have Fatima bintu Muhammad. See, I said bintu Muhammad. If I were to pause, I would say Fatima bint Muhammad. And if I were to say, let's assume Khadija bintu Abdullah, it depends on the grammatical position of the name, whether I say bintu, binti, etc. If I'm not going to connect it with the word or the name afterwards, I just say bint. So if you write the name to be Ruzaynah bint Ma'mun, no problem in that, none whatsoever, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. This is all the time we have. Until we meet next time, I leave you fi amanillah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.